Nowadays, nothing remains of the ancient splendors of Memphis beyond this simple village, which is surrounded by the desert and a few date plantations. What became of this powerful metropolis, founded by King Menes in 3100 BC? This is what remains of the Temple of Ptah, thought to have been one of the largest in ancient Egypt. Much of it is still buried under the small hill where the village of Mitrahina lies today. The problem is, when Memphis went into decline, its monuments were dismantled and the stones were used as building material for new construction. In the distance, you can see one of the many temples that adorned Memphis in a later period. And this is how the capital itself might have looked if you attempted to cross the bustling streets of the city center over 4,000 years ago. As scribes have indicated, bakeries were an important part of life at that time. If you needed bread in the morning, you would have gone to a bakery like this one and bought a very special tasting bread. Bakers would remove the soft inside part of a loaf and sprinkle it with vinegar and water. Then the hollowed-out loaf would be stuffed with a mixture made of pepper, honey, mint, coriander, cheese, salt, and oil. The oven stood in the courtyard of the baker's workshop. Bartering was the sales method used, as money wasn't introduced until 500 BC, many years later. If you had to get some official papers signed, you would have to go to the residence of a high state official, who probably lived in a luxurious and prestigious house like this one. In the large dining room, he would probably have a display of exquisite vases, jars, and furniture, a mark of the taste and status of their owner. The higher social classes loved to surround themselves with exquisite objects and wore elegant clothing, complete with wigs and jewelry. Perfumes and cosmetics were also widely used by men. It was the custom to wear a cone of ointment on one's head, which melted in the heat of the day, saturating wigs and garments with perfume. In homes like this one, owners entertained their guests with sumptuous banquets. But what types of food and drink would be served at the table of a rich Egyptian? What was their diet? Since Egyptians aspired to reach the grand old age of 110, the recommended diet was varied and sensible. They ate 3 meals a day, a snack in the morning and another toward midday, and then the main meal, which corresponds to our dinner. There was no cutlery. Even the pharaoh and his family ate using their fingers, though it was considered good manners to use only the 3 fingers of the right hand. Then, as now, bread was produced in a number of different varieties, and it was kneaded by using hands or even feet. Despite the attention paid to their diets, the ancient Egyptians were found to have bad teeth. Archaeological studies of numerous mummies have proved this. But how could they have good diets and bad teeth? The answer, surprisingly enough, was due to the bread. Since it was produced with stone-ground flour, it contained high quantities of sand, not something you want to crunch on. If you had problems with your teeth, you would have to go to a dentist, a profession that was in great demand at that time. The Egyptians loved their vegetables: garlic, onions, cucumbers, turnips, and lettuce. These were believed to make men amorous and women fertile. They also ate large amounts of seeds from chickpeas, broad beans, and lentils, which were exported all over the Mediterranean. Their favorite fruits were figs, pomegranates, and dates. Roast or grilled beef was considered a delicacy, though the preference was for birds such as geese, ducks, quail, pigeons, and even pelicans, which were also eaten by poorer people. On the other hand, it seems that chickens never appeared on the tables of the pharaohs and their subjects. Wine and strong beer were served at dinner. The wine was kept in sealed pitchers that had labels showing its name, origin, and vintage. These labels are some of the most curious written documents of the ancient world. The invention of writing took place around 3000 BC. As it spread, it allowed for organization of files and record-keeping within the country for the first time. Early writing was derived mainly from the observation of nature. Called hieroglyphics, it was a writing system that aimed to represent ideas by means of drawings. The word scribe, for example, was composed of the hieroglyphic zesh. It portrayed a scribe's work utensils, a palette with slots for red and black pigment, a jar or a water sack, a reed pen or a tool for smoothing papyrus, all tied up together. Thanks to this writing system and to the cursive version, hieratic script, we can understand the Egyptians' myths, fables, and scientific texts, along with their novels, travel journals, and adventure stories. The first adventure story in history is Egyptian, the story of Sinuhe, which was written more than 3,000 years ago. Egyptians had a strong sense of family, and women enjoyed a great deal of authority. The most common demonstration of affection was rubbing noses, while kissing was rare. Marriage was very important in ancient Egypt. The pharaoh could have more than one wife and, if he had the chance, lots of concubines. The man's goal was to give at least one child to each woman in his family. This is why Ramses II, one of the greatest Egyptian pharaohs, whose mummy is at the Cairo Museum, fathered more than 140 children. If you were looking for a lover and you couldn't find your way into their heart by regular means, you could resort to magic. Egyptians believed firmly in magic powers. There were magic cures for illnesses, formulas to ward off the evil eye, and love potions. Further down the Nile is Luxor, about 440 miles south of Cairo. Today it is a quiet place with boats skimming over the calm river waters and the narrow streets of the bazaar crossed by horse-drawn cabs popular with tourists. Luxor is the site of the ancient Egyptian city of Thebes, once the most powerful city in the world. Thebes was made capital instead of Memphis after its princes drove off the Hyksos people, who had invaded Egypt around 1500 BC. Thebes, the city of 100 gates. A city where only the grains of desert sand exceeded the riches that its 500,000 inhabitants had accumulated. Unlike Memphis, Thebes has not disappeared completely. Amongst the modern buildings, you can still see temples, avenues of sphinxes, and other imposing structures of its magnificent past. The remains of the temple dedicated to the god Amun bear witness to this. They were restored by archaeological studies at the end of the 19th century, with the demolition of hundreds of houses that had been built over them. Some of the excavations are still going on. A 15th century mosque still occupies part of the first courtyard. The temple lies parallel to the Nile. Its dimensions are truly majestic, over 800 feet long and 200 feet wide. On this occasion, the statue of Amun left its more permanent residence in the Temple of Karnak and was moved on a sacred boat to visit this temple, its Ipet Reset, or Southern Harem. Two obelisks stood at the entrance to the temple. Now only one remains, but it is truly grand, over 80 feet high and weighing more than 230 tons. What happened to the second obelisk? Watching over the entrance are colossal statues of Ramses II, the pharaoh who was a fearless warrior. In the northwest corner of the temple's first courtyard is the Mosque of Abu el-Hagag, held in great esteem by Muslims. Among the columns here are statues of the pharaoh